They had no idea that the man they had spent 11 years calling just a mechanic, the one my mother introduced at dinner parties as my husband, who works with cars, the one my father had once suggested I leave because I could do better, had, in those same 11 years, built something so quietly and so completely that the morning they drove past the corner of 5th and Meridian in Sacramento, California, and saw his name on the side of a 6-story building, they had to pull the car over. They called me from the parking lot. I let it go to voicemail. This is the story of a man who never needed their approval, who never asked for it, who never mentioned to a single member of my family what he was building in the hours before and after his shift, and what it cost them, and what it gave us, when the building finally had his name on it. My name is Lucia Vasquez Crane. I am 38 years old. I am a licensed occupational therapist in Sacramento, California, where I have worked for 9 years at a rehabilitation center specializing in post-surgical recovery and neurological rehabilitation. My work requires me to help people relearn how to do things they once did without thinking. How to button a shirt, how to hold a cup, how to walk across a room when the body has forgotten the sequence. It requires patience. It requires the ability to see a person's potential clearly, without being distorted by what they cannot yet do. I have had excellent practice at this. My husband's name is Daniel Crane. He is 41 years old. He has been a mechanic since he was 19. Specifically, an automotive technician, which is the precise term, though Daniel has never been precious about the distinction. He started as an apprentice at a shop in West Sacramento, earned his ASE Master Technician's certification at 23, and has worked on engines with the specific, focused competence of someone for whom mechanical systems are a language he was born speaking. He is also, though he did not lead with this when I introduced him to my family, a real estate investor with a portfolio that, at the time I am telling this story, includes 11 residential rental properties, 2 commercial buildings, and a 6-story mixed-use development at the corner of 5th and Meridian in Midtown Sacramento that bears his name on the exterior facade because he is the primary developer and the financing structure required it. He built all of it in the hours before and after his shift. He started when he was 24. He is 41 now. That is 17 years of 5 a.m. mornings and weekend hours, and the particular discipline of a person who has decided, quietly and without announcement, that what other people see when they look at him will eventually be corrected by the record. I did not know the full extent of it when we met. I want to be honest about that. I knew he owned some rental properties. He mentioned it on our 3rd date, matter-of-factly, the way he mentioned most things. He said he had been saving since his first paycheck, and that he had read a book about real estate in his early 20s. That had changed how he thought about income, and that he had been buying properties since then when the numbers made sense. He said it the way you say I've been running since college, as a fact about yourself, not a performance. I had found it interesting. I had not yet understood the scale of it. My parents are Rodrigo and Carmen Vasquez. Rodrigo, 67, a retired civil attorney in Sacramento. Carmen, 64, a former high school principal, also retired. They are by most measures accomplished people. They raised me and my sister Elena in a house in the Land Park neighborhood, sent us to good schools, expected and received academic achievement from both of us, and hold, as a natural consequence of these facts and of the specific cultural grammar of their generation and their social world, a very particular set of beliefs about what constitutes a worthy life and a worthy partner. A mechanic did not fit within those beliefs, not because of any stated prejudice. My parents were too careful for stated prejudices, but in the accumulated weight of small signals. My mother's particular pause when I first mentioned what Daniel did. My father's question, delivered with apparent casualness, about whether Daniel had considered doing something more with his abilities. The way my mother referred to Daniel at the Christmas party as Lucia's husband, he works with cars. Not mechanic, not automotive technician, not any word that would have been accurate. Works with cars. Daniel heard all of it. He said nothing. That was the first thing I understood about him. He was not performing patience. He was simply uninterested in the argument. He had a life to build. The opinion of people who had decided what he was before they knew him was not a variable he had included in his calculations. This was not arrogance. It was the specific self-possession of a person who has something real to stand on. I married him in a small ceremony in Napa Valley 6 years after we met, in a vineyard owned by his college friend Marcus, who had invested in it with advice from Daniel on the financing structure. My parents attended. They were gracious. My father gave a toast that was warm and careful, and did not mention what Daniel did for a living, which I noted and filed. The wedding was beautiful. Napa in October is always beautiful. We drove back to Sacramento, and we bought a house. Daniel had been holding the down payment in a savings account for 2 years, waiting for the right property at the right price, and we began our life, which was quiet and deliberate, and, in the register that mattered most to me, exactly right. My parents visited 4 times a year. Daniel was consistently good to them. Attentive, present, genuinely interested in my father's opinions on policy, and my mother's observations about education reform. He asked good questions. He listened to the answers. He had the quality of someone who finds people genuinely interesting, regardless of whether they are being generous toward him, which is a rarer quality than it should be. My mother received this well. My father received it with the specific warmth of a man who likes Daniel personally, and has kept entirely separate his belief that Lucia could have married a professional. The two things coexisted in my parents' home in Land Park for 11 years. They coexisted at Christmas dinners and birthday dinners, and the occasional Sunday lunch. They coexisted in phone calls, where my mother asked about my work and mentioned, occasionally, and without any apparent agenda, that her colleague's daughter had married a physician, and they seemed very settled. Daniel knew. I never hid my parents' views from him. We talked about it exactly once, in the first year of our marriage, when I came home from a Sunday lunch at my parents' house, and he could see from my face that something had been said. "What was it this time?" he said. He was at the kitchen table with a legal pad and a set of property documents. There was a cup of coffee beside him that had gone cold. "Dad suggested that you might want to think about management, at the dealership level. More administrative." Daniel looked at the legal pad. He turned a page. He said. "I told him you were happy with your work." "I am happy with my work," he said. "The Porsche I had in last week had an engine fault that 3 other shops missed." "That's interesting to me." "I know," I said. "Your father wants me to have a title that sounds like something," he said. Not bitterly, observationally. "Yes," I said. He picked up the cold coffee, looked at it, set it back down. "I have titles," he said. "They're on property deeds. He'll see them eventually." I looked at my husband across the kitchen table, at the legal pad covered in numbers, at the property documents, at the expression of a man who is entirely at peace with the gap between what he is perceived to be and what he is actually building. "How many properties now?" I said. 7, he said. I nodded. I made a new pot of coffee. We spent the evening at the kitchen table, me with patient files, him with property documents, in the specific comfortable silence of 2 people who have found the right kind of quiet together. The detail I want to plant here, the one that will matter later, is something Daniel said to me in the 2nd year of our marriage. On a Sunday morning when he had been up since 5, and I found him at the kitchen table with a thick folder of documents and a legal pad, covered in calculations I could not immediately parse. "What is that?" I said. "A prospectus," he said. "Commercial development, mixed use, residential above, retail below." I poured coffee. "Where?" "Midtown. There's a parcel on 5th that's been sitting vacant for 4 years. The owner wants out. The numbers are interesting. Can we afford it?" "Not alone," he said. "I'd need partners. And financing. And about 3 years of planning." He looked at the legal pad. "But the bones are there, Daniel," I said. "We've been married 2 years. "I know," he said. "That's why I'm planning now." He looked entirely unbothered by the size of the gap between where he was and what he was describing, which is something I had come to recognize as one of the essential qualities of the man I had married. He was not intimidated by distance. He measured it, calculated the route, and began. I sat down with my coffee. I looked at the prospectus. Tell me about the parcel, I said. He told me. The most reliable people are not the ones who announce what they are going to build. They are the ones who are already laying the foundation, while the announcement is still unnecessary. The event that changed the surface of things. The one I am required to call a trigger, though it arrived with no drama at all, and was recognized as significant only in retrospect, happened at my parents' 38th anniversary dinner. They had it catered, at the Land Park House, for approximately 30 guests. Family, friends, former colleagues, the specific social geography of two retired professionals in Sacramento who have spent decades accumulating the kind of acquaintances who attend anniversary parties. My sister Elena was there with her husband, Dr. Philip Okafor, who is a hospitalist at UC Davis Medical Center and who my parents discuss with a warmth that is entirely genuine, and also, I have always felt, subtly calibrated to fill the room with a comparison that is never stated. I had made peace with this. Elena and Philip are wonderful people and I love them. The comparison was my parents' problem, not theirs. The dinner was pleasant for the first 2 hours. Daniel was beside me, in a jacket that fit well and a demeanor of calm interest, talking with my father's former law partner about a city council infrastructure decision that the former partner found interesting, and that Daniel, it turned out, had read about in some depth because it affected the zoning designation of a parcel in the Oak Park neighborhood he had been watching. My father joined the conversation. He listened for a few minutes. Then he said, in the amiable tone of someone making what they believe is a helpful observation, Daniel should have gone into law. He thinks like a lawyer. The former law partner agreed. Daniel smiled. I'm happy with what I do, he said. My father gave a small nod that meant he had heard but not accepted this. After dinner, in the kitchen, my mother was speaking with two of her friends. Women I had known since childhood, the kind of women who have been fixtures of my parents' social world, since before I was old enough to understand social worlds. I was at the counter, refilling my water glass, when I heard my mother say, in the specific register of a woman who believes the kitchen conversation is contained, Lucia has always had her own ideas about things. The husband, he's a good man, truly, but he's a mechanic, and I think she expected it to evolve into something, and it simply hasn't, and she's made her peace with it. I stood at the counter. I did not turn around. I held my water glass, and I listened to my mother describe my marriage as a settling, as a thing I had accepted rather than chosen, as evidence of my stubbornness rather than my judgment. One of her friends said, well, she's happy, Carmen. That's what matters. My mother said, of course it is, in the particular tone of a woman for whom it is not quite all that matters. I set down my water glass. I walked back to the dining room. I sat beside Daniel, and I did not tell him what I had heard because he did not need to carry it, and I did not need to perform it. I simply sat beside my husband at my parents' anniversary party and looked at the room full of people who had spent 11 years deciding what he was. Daniel put his hand over mine on the table. He had not heard what my mother said. He simply noticed, as he always noticed, that something had shifted in my posture. You okay? He said quietly. Yes, I said. He looked at me for one more second, reading the fuller answer in the shorter one, and then he went back to his conversation with my father's law partner. I thought about the prospectus on the kitchen table 9 years before. The parcel on 5th. The calculations on the legal pad. I thought about the building permit application I had seen on that same kitchen table 3 years ago, which I had asked about, and Daniel had described in the specific, unbothered language of a man, presenting the next logical step in a sequence. I thought about the conversation I had had our accountant the previous April, in which she had described our overall financial picture in terms that had taken me a moment to fully absorb. I looked at my parents' dining room. All right, I said, to no one in particular. I picked up my water glass and I finished the party, 7 weeks after the anniversary dinner. On a Tuesday morning in March, Daniel drove me past the corner of 5th and Meridian on our way to breakfast. He had asked me to come with him. Just for a drive, he said, which was unusual enough that I had noticed it and agreed without asking why. We turned onto 5th from L Street, and I looked up, and I saw the building. It was finished. 6 stories of mixed-use development, retail at street level, residential above. The kind of midtown construction that Sacramento had been needing, and not getting for years in that corridor. The exterior was clean and considered. Not showy, not minimal but specific. The way Daniel's decisions were always specific. There was a sign on the corner of the facade at the street level, in the clean sans serif lettering of a professionally completed building, Crane, Meridian Development. I looked at the sign for a moment. Daniel pulled into a parking space across the street. He put the car in park. He did not say anything. I looked at the building, all 6 stories of it. The retail spaces on the ground floor, the residential windows above, the corner sign with his name. When did it go up? I said. The sign I meant. Last week, he said. They installed the facade signage last week. You didn't tell me. I wanted you to see it. I looked at the building for another moment. I thought about 17 years. About a legal pad covered in calculations and a prospectus on a kitchen table, and 9 years of 5 a.m. mornings and the specific patience of a person who is building something real in the hours that other people spend explaining themselves. I thought about my mother's voice in the kitchen at the anniversary party. He's a mechanic, and I think she expected it to evolve into something and it simply hasn't. I thought about what my mother did not know about her daughter's husband, about what she had never asked to know, about the 11 years of Sunday lunches and Christmas dinners in which she had held a complete and confident picture of Daniel Crane, and had never once considered whether the picture was accurate. It's beautiful, I said. The retail is already 60% leased, he said. Residential is fully leased. There's a waiting list. Of course there is, I said. He looked at me. He had the expression he had when something large had landed and he was giving it room. You're not going to make a speech, are you? He said. No, I said. Good. He looked at the building. You want to go inside? Yes, I said. We crossed the street. He had a key. We took the elevator to the 6th floor and stood at the window of an empty residential unit looking out over midtown Sacramento in the March morning light. The grid of the city below us, the river in the distance, the particular quality of Sacramento light in early spring, which is clear and a little cool, and makes everything look like it is exactly where it is supposed to be. I stood beside my husband in his building, and I thought about the mechanic my parents had spent 11 years deciding he was. And then I thought about nothing in particular. I just looked at the city. You do not need to announce what you have built. The building announces it. The record announces it. The thing itself, standing in the light where everyone can see it, is the only statement that was ever necessary. My parents drove past the corner of 5th and Meridian 11 days after Daniel took me there. They were on their way to a lunch in Midtown. My mother's book club met at a restaurant on our street, and my father always dropped her off. They drove down 5th, as they often did, and my mother saw the building. She called me from the parking lot. I let it go to voicemail. My father called 20 minutes later from the same parking lot, which told me something about the duration and content of the conversation they were having in the car. I let that go to voicemail too. I was at work. I was in the middle of a session with a patient. A man in his 50s recovering from a spinal injury, relearning the fine motor sequence for holding a pen. We were at the point where he could make the grip, but was losing it under sustained pressure, and we were working on the muscle memory. I was present for that. The voicemails could wait. I called my father back at 6 that evening. We drove past a building today, he said. I know, I said. Crane Meridian Development, yes. A pause. That's Daniel, yes. A longer pause. My father, Rodrigo Vasquez, retired civil attorney, 67 years old. A man who had spent his career in rooms where precision mattered, was quiet in a way that I recognized as genuine recalibration. Not performance. Not the managed pause of someone deciding how to respond to surprising news. The actual stillness of a person whose model of a situation has just been revised. How long has he been doing this? He said. Real estate investing since he was 24, I said. He's 41. The Fifth Street development has been in planning for about 9 years. 9 years. He started the prospectus 2 years into our marriage. We were still in the apartment on T Street. My father was quiet again. Why didn't he tell us? He said. Not accusatory, genuinely asking. The question of a man who is trying to understand a sequence of events that did not proceed the way he expected. I thought about how to answer that. You never asked him, I said. In 11 years, I don't think anyone in our family ever asked Daniel what he was working on. They asked what he did for work. He said he was an automotive technician. That was the end of the inquiry. A long pause. That's fair, my father said. Yes, I said, it is. We were quiet for a moment. Can I ask you something? I said. Yes, he said. The things you and Mom have said about him, the way you've introduced him at parties, the comment about management, the career suggestions. Did you say those things because you thought he wasn't smart enough for more? Or because you thought he wasn't ambitious enough? My father took a moment. Honestly? He said. Please. I said them because I didn't understand what he was. I looked at the job title and I built an entire picture from it, and then I held that picture even when it didn't fit. A pause. Your mother still does that more than I do. I've known for a few years that there was something I was missing about him. I didn't push on it. Why not? Because it was easier not to, he said. And because I was afraid if I asked, I would find out I had been wrong about something for a long time. I held the phone for a moment. This was the most honest thing my father had said to me about Daniel in 11 years. It was also the most honest thing he had said about himself. You have been wrong about something for a long time, I said. I know, he said. Saying it is the first part, I said. The next part is saying it to him. A pause. I know that too, he said. My mother's call came 2 days later, on a Thursday evening. It was different from my father's call in its texture. Where my father had been still, my mother was in motion, the motion of a woman who is processing something that does not fit, and is moving through possible framings of it. She said she had looked up the building. She had found the development permits, the property records, the LLC filing. She had found the press item in the Sacramento Business Journal from 8 months before, a short piece about the 5th and Meridian development and its primary developer, which described Daniel as a Sacramento native with a background in skilled trades who has built a significant residential and commercial portfolio through disciplined long-term investment. She read me that phrase over the phone, a background in skilled trades. That's him, she said. Yes, I said. The journal piece says he has 11 residential properties and 2 other commercial buildings. Yes. In addition to the development, yes. She was quiet for a moment. I waited. I didn't know, she said. No, I said. A pause. Lucia, Mom. I kept my voice level, not cold but honest. In the specific way I had learned to be honest with my mother over the years. Not to wound her but to give her the truth in a form she could actually receive. I need to say something to you that I have not said before. All right, she said. For 11 years, you have introduced my husband as someone who works with cars. You have implied, at various points and in various settings, that I made a compromise when I married him. You have, at your own anniversary party, in your own kitchen, told your friends that I made my peace with my marriage. A silence. You didn't know I heard that, I said. No, she said, very quietly. Daniel has never said anything about the way you treat him. Not to you. Not to me beyond factual reporting. He has come to every dinner, every holiday, every party, and he has been exactly himself. Attentive and decent and genuinely interested in the people around him, while you and Dad decided what he was without ever looking carefully at the evidence. My mother was silent. He is the best person I know, I said. He has been the best person I know since the 3rd date. The building didn't change that. The building just made it visible to people who needed to see it in a form they could recognize. A long pause. You're right, my mother said. I waited. I have not been fair to him, she said. I was holding something that was not based on who he is. It was based on what I thought a title meant. A pause. That was wrong of me. Yes, I said. I owe him an apology. You do. Will he? Is he someone who can receive that? I thought about my husband at the kitchen table at 5 a.m., working through property documents while the city was still asleep. I thought about him at my parents' dinner table, asking my father's law partner genuine questions about infrastructure zoning, not to perform interest, but because he was genuinely interested. I thought about him in the parking lot on 5th Street, saying, "You're not going to make a speech, are you?" "He's the least grudge-holding person I know," I said. "If you give him a real apology, he will receive it as such." "What makes it real?" my mother said, not defensively, actually asking. "It says what you did wrong," I said, "and it doesn't say if." A pause. "I've heard that before. It's worth remembering," I said. The dinner, the one at which my parents came to our house for the first time in our 9 years of living there, which is itself a detail worth noting, was on a Saturday evening 3 weeks after the voicemails. Daniel cooked. He is a good cook in the specific way that competent, patient people are good cooks. Not showy, but precise about what each ingredient requires and attentive to the sequence. He made a short rib braise that had been going since noon, and a roasted vegetable situation, and the specific kind of bread he had learned from a YouTube video 6 years ago, and made approximately once a month because we both liked it. My parents arrived at 7. My father shook Daniel's hand at the door. A real handshake, not the managed version he had deployed at various formal occasions, but the handshake of a man who is beginning something rather than maintaining something. My mother said, at the door, before we had moved to the living room, "Daniel, I owe you an apology. I have not treated you the way you deserve to be treated, and I want to say that directly." Daniel looked at her, she continued. "I made assumptions about you based on your job title, and I held those assumptions past the point where any honest look at the evidence supported them. That was not fair to you. I'm sorry." Daniel looked at her for a moment, in the way he looked at things he was assessing genuinely. "I appreciate that," he said. "Thank you. Not don't worry about it. Not it's fine, really. Thank you." The acknowledgement of a person who has received what was offered and has accepted it as real. My mother looked, for a moment, like someone who has done a thing that was difficult and has found it was possible. "Dinner smells remarkable," my father said. "Short rib," Daniel said. "It's been going since noon. Come in." They came in. "We had dinner." My father asked Daniel over the short rib how the development process had worked. The financing structure, the permitting, the construction management. Daniel explained it with the patient specificity of someone who has been living inside a complex project for 9 years and can, when asked, describe any part of it from the inside. My father listened the way he listened in his courtroom years. Fully, with the specific attention of someone tracking a sequence of logic and checking it for soundness. At one point he said, "The LLC structure for the residential units, you kept that separate from the development entity." "Yes," Daniel said, "different risk profiles. I didn't want the development financing to encumber the residential portfolio if the project ran long." My father looked at him. "That's sound," he said. "That's what my attorney said," Daniel said. My father looked at the short rib. "I should have asked you about this years ago," he said, not dramatically. Simply, "Yes," Daniel said. "But the food would have been worse. I've gotten better." My father laughed, a real laugh, the kind that arrives without management. My mother smiled. I watched her smile and thought about the kitchen at the anniversary party, and about the particular cost of a long wrong assumption finally being set down. An apology delivered at a dinner table is not the end of something. It is the beginning of the revised version, the one that could have existed all along if someone had looked more carefully at the evidence earlier. It is late. It is also real. Both of those things can be true. The morning after the dinner, my father called Daniel directly. I know this because Daniel told me. He came into the kitchen at 7:30, already dressed, with his coffee, and said, in the manner of a man reporting a fact, "Your father called." "This morning?" "About 20 minutes ago. He wanted to ask a follow-up question about the financing structure for the commercial spaces. He had a thought overnight." I looked at my husband. "He had a thought overnight," I said. "About real estate investment structuring, yes. He's been thinking about the tax implications of the LLC separation, and he had a read on a case, from his practice years, that might be relevant. Daniel looked at his coffee. It actually was relevant. I hadn't thought about it from that angle. I stood in the kitchen for a moment. My father gave you useful legal insight on a real estate investment structure, I said. He's a smart man, Daniel said. He spent 35 years thinking about contract structures. The application is different, but the logic is similar. He paused. I'm having lunch with him on Wednesday. You're having lunch with my father, he asked. I said yes. He looked at me. Is that strange? It is 11 years late, I said. Yes, he said, but Wednesday works. They had lunch at a restaurant downtown, a place my father chose, which Daniel reported as having acceptable food and excellent coffee. My father apparently brought a legal pad, which Daniel found both characteristic and useful. They talked for 2 hours about the financing structure, about the zoning variance process Daniel had navigated, about a property tax appeal Daniel had been considering for the Oak Park parcel. My father, according to Daniel, had opinions. Good ones. In 2 cases. In one case, a perspective that Daniel had already considered and rejected, but which he appreciated having validated as considered rather than obvious. They scheduled a second lunch. I received a call from my mother while they were at lunch, which I found subtly comic in its timing. The two of them, separately, finding their way toward my husband at the same hour. My mother wanted to talk about Elena's upcoming birthday. She also, about 15 minutes in, said, "He's remarkable, isn't he? You're Daniel." I set down the dish I was washing. "Yes," I said. "He is. I've been thinking about the way I've talked about him for years." A pause. It wasn't about him, really. It was about what I wanted your life to look like, and I dressed that up as concern. "Yes," I said. "I'm going to try to do better." "I know," I said. "I believe you." She was quiet for a moment. "The building is really something. He'll be glad to hear you think so," I said. "You should tell him." "I will," she said. She did. At the next Family Sunday. A lunch at our house, which was now where Family Sunday happened. Because Daniel's short rib had apparently established a precedent. My mother told Daniel that she had driven past the building again, this time in the daylight on purpose, and that she had stood on the sidewalk and looked at it for a few minutes. "It belongs there," she said. "On that corner. It looks like it was always supposed to be there." Daniel looked at her for a moment. "That's the highest compliment a building can get," he said. My mother looked genuinely pleased. "The thing I want to say about what changed, and what didn't, is this. My parents' approval did not change what Daniel had built. The building was what it was before they drove past it and after. The portfolio was what it was. The 17 years of 5 a.m. mornings and disciplined compounding and patient strategic thinking were what they were, independent of whether the Vasquez family of Land Park, Sacramento, was aware of them. What changed was smaller and also more significant: the quality of the table. My parents joined us for Sunday lunch on a reasonably regular basis after the dinner with the short rib. My father and Daniel had a standing monthly lunch that had, by the end of that year, become something I recognized as genuine. Two precise, methodical men who had found, across a gap of 30 years and very different professional worlds, a common language in the logic of structures and the mathematics of decisions. My father began referring to Daniel, at his former colleagues' gatherings, as my son-in-law, who develops commercial real estate in Sacramento. I heard this from his law partner's wife at a holiday event. I did not say anything, I simply noted it, the way I noted things. My mother told her book club friends about the Fifth and Meridian building. I know because one of them mentioned it to me, warmly, at an event the following spring. She said Carmen had spoken about it with evident pride. I received that information and I held it carefully, the way you hold something that is still fragile but is beginning to be real. Daniel received all of it, with the same composure he had brought to 11 years of not receiving it. He did not gloat. He did not make references to the long years of being underestimated. He simply incorporated my parents into the version of our life where they belonged. The Sunday table, the Wednesday lunch, the occasional question from my father about a property tax appeal or a zoning variance. He had always been who he was. They were learning, belatedly, to see it. I want to tell you about a morning in June, 8 months after the anniversary dinner, on a weekend when we drove past 5th and Meridian on our way somewhere. I looked up at the building the way I always looked up at it now, with the specific satisfaction of having watched something come from a legal pad on a kitchen table to a 6-story structure on a midtown corner, over 9 years, in the hours before and after a shift. The retail on the ground floor, I said. The end unit, there's a coffee shop going in? Signed the lease last week, Daniel said. Opens in September. We'll have to go. Obviously, he said. I looked at the building. At the facade sign with his name. At the clean lines of it against the Sacramento morning sky, I thought about my mother standing on the sidewalk, looking up at it, deciding it belonged there. I thought about my father at a restaurant with a legal pad, finding common language with the man he had spent 11 years calling just a mechanic. I thought about what it had taken, from Daniel, to build something so real that it could not be argued with. Not argued with in conversation, not argued with at a dinner table, not argued with from the parking lot of a book club restaurant on a Tuesday in March, and I thought about what it had cost him to say nothing, for 11 years, while he built it. Does it bother you? I said, that it took a building for them to see you. He drove for a moment without answering, which was how he processed questions he wanted to answer correctly. No, he said. I didn't build it for them to see me. I built it because the numbers made sense, and because I wanted to. He paused. Them seeing it, that's just what happens when you put something real in a place where people drive past it. I looked at him. That's the most you've ever said about it, I said. You asked a specific question, he said. I did. He drove. The building moved past the window. The coffee shop is going to have good beans, he said. I asked specifically. Of course you did. I said, the most powerful position to build from is not the one the world has assigned you. It is the one you have chosen. The one you return to at 5 in the morning, with a legal pad and a cold cup of coffee, when the world is still arranging its opinions about who you are. Build from there. Build accurately. Build long. The building will do the rest. My parents attended the opening event for the 5th and Meridian development in September. The coffee shop opening, which Daniel had kept small and specific, the way he kept things. A ribbon, a remark from the building manager, coffee for the people who showed up. My mother wore a dress she saved for events she considered significant. My father shook Daniel's hand at the door, as he had at our dinner in April, and said, "Congratulations." Daniel said, "Thank you for coming." We had coffee standing on the sidewalk in the September light, the 6-story building rising above us, with his name on the corner, the retail space full of people who did not know the 11 years behind the lease, the table, the legal pad, the 5 a.m. mornings, the patients. My father looked up at the facade. You know what I keep thinking about, he said. What? Daniel said. The LLC separation, my father said. The way you kept the residential portfolio clear of the development risk. I've been thinking about it since our first lunch. It's exactly right. Daniel looked at the building. It seemed like the obvious structure, he said. The obvious structure is the one that most people miss. My father said. Daniel looked at him. Something passed between them. The specific recognition of two precise people finding each other's precision and finding it sound. Come inside, Daniel said. The espresso is good. We went inside. There will be people in your life who decide what you are before they look at the evidence. Some of them will never revise the decision, and some of them, when the building is tall enough, when the record is clear enough, when the thing you have built is standing in the light where it cannot be missed, some of them will drive past it on a Tuesday morning and pull over and call you from the parking lot. Let the voicemail fill. Finish your work. Call them back when you're ready. The building will be there when you do. And that was the year I understood that the quietest form of dignity is not the refusal to be underestimated. It is the choice to continue building, carefully and without announcement, in the full understanding that what you build will eventually speak in a voice that carries further than any argument ever could. Daniel Crane was never just a mechanic. He was always exactly what he was. The building simply made it a matter of public record.